Ma'am, you're on.
Okay. Good morning. Thank you so much for allowing me to come and talk to you all. Again, my name is Crystal Quade, and I am the state representative for this legislative district. So a little bit about me, we'll start there. I'm 33 years old, in case anyone is curious. I grew up in Rogersville, and I actually participated in some of the dual enrollment classes through OTC, so I'm an OTC student as well. When I graduated high school, I moved to Springfield, went to Missouri State University, graduated in 2008, and my degree is in social work. I'm a first generation high school graduate, so the first in my family to graduate high school. And when I started looking at colleges, Missouri State was obviously the closest, and it was actually the only school I applied to. I didn't really know much beyond my little bubble of what I grew up in Rogersville. But I had a great experience at Missouri State, and I'm super happy that I went there because I really feel like that's how I got to where I'm at right now. So when I was studying at Missouri State, my first degree was psychology. I thought that I wanted to help people. So I grew up in a single parent household for the majority of my life. My mom was on food stamps and waited tables her whole life. And so I kind of grew up in what you would consider a poverty-stricken family. My mom got remarried when I was an early teen, and that really changed the direction of my life and my opportunities, which I believe is what led me to being the first to graduate high school. I have older siblings who did not have that opportunity to do that. So I wanted to help people, and I thought psychology was really the area that I wanted to do. And so I spent about 3.5 years in that major, doing everything I was supposed to do, and then I had a professor come to me and say, hey, I think you really might like social work more. And so we talked through that degree program, and I changed my major. So I added an entire year to my college, which was a pretty scary thing to do. But I'm super glad I did it, because when I was studying social work, I took a class on policy. And so I had never taken any government classes. I knew nothing about government. It was not something my family was ever interested in. And as I began studying policy and what that really meant, I realized that everything I wanted to do as a social worker was dictated by people who were elected in government. If I wanted to help people get resources, the government told me how much they could receive. If I wanted, looking at my student loan debt, the government had so much say over how much tuition I had to pay. So I decided to do my internship that's required for graduation in Jefferson City. I was actually the first social work student at Missouri State University to go through the political science legislative internship program, which was a really cool experience, but I spent a lot of time trying to defend myself to people because they're like, why would a social worker care about political science? And having to really bridge that conversation for people that everything I wanted to do on the social work side was dictated by the political side. And so I went to Jeff City, and I say this often, it was about week 2 that I got there that I realized that nobody in that building really understood poverty. And so here we had 163 legislators dictating everything around low-income families, and nobody who had really gone through it, and nobody who really understood it to the level that I felt was necessary. So it was when I was 19 or 20, on the week 2, that I decided one day I would run for office. It was never in my plans until that point. So I finished my internship. It was a full legislative session, so our sessions go January through May. So I spent Monday through Thursday in Jefferson City, just like the legislators do, working 10 to 16-hour days, and then coming back to Springfield on the weekends. Fortunately, that internship opened a door for a job, so I graduated on Friday. That Monday, I started working for the United States Senate for Senator Claire McCaskill here in Springfield. And I did constituent services work for her, which is essentially when anyone in Missouri has problems, like say you're a veteran and the VA isn't paying your medical bills. You can reach out to your elected officials, and they have people on their staff who will help you navigate through the systems of government. And so that's what I did. I covered Department of State, Department of Higher Education. I did Department of Social Services and a few different departments. And so I really got to understand how in-depth government can be and the things that it provides for our people, which was a pretty neat experience. After that, I worked there for about 2 years, and then I decided to jump into the campaign world. I got a job with Organizing for America, which was the community organizing arm that formed after President Obama got elected. So he had this campaign team after he won office. Instead of just getting rid of the campaign team, which is generally what happens, they decided to start a community organizing effort. So what I did for them was I was in the community here in Springfield in Southwest Missouri, and I would teach people how to advocate for themselves or issues. Things like, how do you write a letter to an editor? Or what is it like when you call your state representative and say you want X, Y, Z done? And kind of teach folks how to advocate, how to get involved in government. So I did that for a little while, and then they actually farmed us out to work on a U.S. Senate race. So I worked on the campaign for Robin Carnahan for U.S. Senate in 2010. And we lost terribly. And I learned during that year that campaign work is something that I absolutely did not want to be a part of. It's dirty, it's long hours, and I worked over 150 days without a day off, literally, and it was not something that I really loved. So after that job was done, went back into the nonprofit sector, went back to be a social worker. And so I've worked in Springfield for about 8 years for various nonprofits, my most recent being with an organization called Care to Learn. And what we do is partner with school districts across the state to fund basic needs for kids. So we would teach communities how to raise money and buy things from toothbrushes and tennis shoes to food, clothing, hygiene products to make sure that when kids would go to school, those types of things were not getting in the way of their learning. So I did that for about 7 years and I really loved that work. So this legislative seat opened up. In Missouri, you can serve 8 years in the Missouri House of Representatives, each one being a 2-year term. So the gentleman who had the seat before me was termed out. He couldn't run again. So I decided to run. My husband and I had a 1-year-old at home, and then I had 2 older stepchildren who at the time were 9 and 10. And it was a hard choice, as I'm sure a lot of you could imagine. Running for office with a 1-year-old is not easy. But here in Springfield, there were a lot of things going on at the local governmental level that I didn't agree with. We had a sexual orientation protection added to the city of Springfield so that folks could not be fired or denied housing for their orientation or gender identity. And that was part of our law in Springfield. And then by a petition drive and a vote of the people, that got overturned. And so again, in Springfield, as a lot of Missouri, you can be fired for either of those things or denied housing. And so that was something that was pretty deeply personal to my family and friends, and that combined with some things that were going on at the national level, it was just kind of, for my husband and I, somebody's got to do this, right? Somebody's got to run for this seat now that he's gone, and who's it going to be? Well, I've been preparing for this for a long time, and we just jumped right in. So I had 2 elections in 2016. I had a primary election and then a general. The primary, I won with about 65% of the vote. Running a primary campaign is difficult. It's not something I really enjoy because you're running against someone with your same ideology. And so I am someone who doesn't believe in negative campaigning. I don't like talking bad about people. I like to talk about how you vote or how you stand for things and why I'm the best person for the job. And not everyone plays that way, right? So it was pretty difficult. I was also dubbed the nice young girl who just had a baby who needs to wait her turn. So that was a really fun thing to navigate through. But we ended up winning that race and then had a general election and worked really hard. We knocked about 40,000 times in the district, a whole lot of doors, talked to a whole lot of people, and ended up winning that race as well. So that was in 2016. So in Missouri, again, we start in January, so I got sworn into office in 2017, and I've been serving for 2 years in the House of Representatives for this district. I am up for re-election again in November, and I do have a challenger, and so we're working hard and doing it all over again. Since in Jeff City, it's been really interesting. I've learned a whole lot. I absolutely love what I do, but it is very hard. So in Jeff City, we have 163 state reps. Of those 163, only 46 are Democrats. So what that means is I'm part of the party that is what's considered a super minority. So when we want to begin a debate, there has to be a certain amount of people in the room to do so. If none of the Democrats show up, they can still conduct business and continue to do whatever folks want to do. That's how little of us there are. Add to that, there are only 36 women out of 163 people, and then about under 40 are what we would call millennials in that place. So it's a very interesting place to be for a 33-year-old woman Democrat in Jeff City right now. But I've learned a lot and I've done a lot, and I've really enjoyed my time there. Even in the super minority, as you want to call it, I feel like I've gotten a lot done. Jefferson City, fortunately, is not as partisan as we would like to make it seem. The very first bill that I filed, I found a Republican to file the exact same language, knowing that if I wanted to get a bill passed, a Republican would have to do it. We got to committee, we had a great hearing. The second year, I filed it by myself. I got it out of 2 committees, and we can talk a little bit more about that process. But it has not become law yet, but a lot of bills can take 5 or 6 years, and in 2 years, I've already gotten it further than most people do, which is a really exciting thing. And I've done that by finding allies for various issues across the aisle. I believe that either side having super controls of the legislature is not a good way to get policy done. My ideas are not always the best ideas just because I think they are. And so having different perspectives there is super important. And that's really how we get good policy done, is by having serious discussions from people from different backgrounds and political ideologies. And we do that a lot in Jeff City. We really do. You know, I won't lie that there were 10 to 15 bills that crossed, you know, last year that I absolutely hated and think are terrible and going to do some serious harm. But we had 2,000 bills filed. And so 15 is not that bad when you're talking about how many bills we're actually working on. And so that was probably, in terms of the things that I've learned that I've been really happy about, it's been that. It's been that we can really find common ground with people that we think we absolutely hate, and get some stuff done. And a great example of that, I'm a very pro-choice candidate. Right next to us in Lawrence County is Representative Mike Moon, who is the complete opposite, probably the most conservative state representative we have around women's health care issues. And if you Google him, you will understand why I say that. He and I will go toe-to-toe on this issue and fight to the death. He cries on the floor, I cry on the floor, and it's this terrible conversation. But then literally the next bill, and this happened, the next bill was to fund a child care program I was working on, and he tried to move $2 million for me to get it done. And that happened within a course of 5 minutes. And that's how Jeff City is, and I hope other places throughout the country are, that you can completely disagree on one thing fundamentally, but continue to work with each other on a separate issue. And so that's been one of the pleasant things that I've learned since I've been there. But don't get me wrong, there are a lot of politics in this, and things do get very nasty. People say terrible things. But what's really nice about this world, so to speak, is that we can be cutthroat with each other, but it doesn't ruin our relationships, because we have a job to do, and our job is to represent our people. And if, you know, I've got OTC, Missouri State, Evangel, and Drury. And so when it comes to higher education issues and keeping costs low, I fight for that because I know how important it is for my people. Well, we've got folks who don't represent any students at all and find it as a way to save money if we take money from higher ed and put it over here. We will fight about those issues, but that doesn't change our relationship, which is a really nice thing. So other things, since I've been in Jeff City, I serve on the budget committee as a social worker. I never really cared about money or have never been a good money planner, to be honest with you. I have almost 30 grand in student loan debt, and it's surprising to me that I get to serve on the budget committee, and it's a true honor to do it. The budget committee is the most nonpartisan place in the building. We have one constitutional requirement in the state of Missouri as a legislature, and that's to pass a balanced budget. That's it. So every other bill that we pass every year is just fluff on top of what we're constitutionally told to do. So right now in Missouri, we spend about $27 billion a year. And that's everything from social services, safety nets, to higher education, transportation, all the things that government spends money on, roads and bridges. $27 billion is what we do. And what's really cool about serving on the budget committee is we get to determine how that money's spent. It's broken down in various structures, and I won't get too much in the weeds with that, but you get an area of focus that you work on. So I'm health, mental health, and social services is my subcommittee for budget. And there's a small group of us, about 10 people, who first round determine where that money goes. And then it goes to the full budget committee, and we work on everything together and move money around. And then from there it goes to the House floor for full debate. So every legislator gets a stab at the budget, but being on the budget committee is really where the decisions are made, which is a really cool place to be. Because, you know, if I have an idea for a program or a bill that I want to pass, money has to come alongside that, whether that's to fund a program, to hire staff, or to take money away from something and put it back into general revenue. Budget is really where 90% of the things happen. So I get to serve on that committee. The downside to that is I work a ton. So the longest day that I've spent in that building in Jefferson City was from 8 a.m. to 1:30 in the morning. And I didn't get to go outside once. So it's a lot of work. The budget books, so when you look at our state budget, there's individual lines. So it may say like Missouri State University, this much money. There's individual lines, and they're compiled in these books. If you stack all the books up, they come out to about here. And so I have to read all those and determine whether or not I agree with the money that the governor says. The governor will tell us, like, this is how I think you should spend it. And then we say, no, we think you're wrong, and we move all the money around. And that's kind of the process that it goes through. So the budget committee is a lot of hard work, but it's really rewarding and a really great place to be. I also have really learned about government. And again, the government was not something that I originally, when I was young, really cared that much about. But the more and more I learn about it, and the more I truly understand how it impacts every single thing of our lives. And I wish that I had the words to adequately explain that to people to get them to understand that. But when you go through those budget books and see where we're investing our money and what we're doing, it's everything. So it's a cool place to be. And again, it's not very partisan. We debate a little, we'll debate about, well, I think this university should get this much money, or I think that, this program deserves more, or I think that's a terrible program, we shouldn't be spending any money on it. Like one time we debated for 4 hours about feral hogs. Do y'all know that we spend money on feral hogs in Missouri? We have a terrible problem in East Missouri where feral hogs will destroy all of the vegetation. And so our farmers, which that's the biggest export that we have is agriculture, it annihilates our entire industry. So the state of Missouri spends money to kill feral hogs.
And I'm sorry, I gotta stop you there. I'm a city guy. I know
Yes.
nothing about anything else. You mean wild hogs?
Wild hogs, yes.
Wild hogs. You're saying the state of Missouri spends money
A lot of money.
to hunt down and kill
and
wild hogs.
so the debates have been, well, how do we kill them? What's the most cost-effective way to kill these hogs that are destroying our vegetation? Do we get a helicopter and pay for the helicopter and people to shoot rifles out of them? Yes, we do. We do that. Or should we allow farmers in the area to get permits to kill the hogs? Well, we could do that, but then if they eat the hogs, does that cost us money in healthcare? Because are they safe to eat? Well, we don't know. I'm a social worker. I know nothing about whether or not we can eat feral hogs. So we spent 4 hours, I'm not kidding, my first year in the budget hearing talking about it. These are the kind of things that we talk about. Sometimes it's super boring. Sometimes you learn about wild hogs and how they're terrible. So it's an interesting place to be, and I really learned a lot about our government and the things that are important to people. Somebody from Springfield would have no idea that feral hogs is a problem. But for a farmer in southeast Missouri, that's their livelihood, is providing whatever it is that they're growing and soybean products and selling that. One, that's huge for our economy and one of the most important things we have, but that's their life. And if the government doesn't have to get involved in that, we don't have to choose to participate in the feral hog debacle that we have, but we do, because when you look at the bigger economic picture for the state of Missouri, if we're not helping those farmers sell their vegetation, we don't get the economic impact of that. And then we have folks who possibly are on social services, etc. Everything that we do is so interconnected. It's pretty crazy. And so it's been really interesting since I've been there for the past 2 years. To dive into a little bit about why I identify as a Democrat. So I grew up in Webster County, as I said. I am the only Democrat in my family that I know of. And I can say, again, we weren't a political family. I wasn't super engaged, but I do fit the stereotype that when I went to college, I became a crazy liberal. But really, what it was for me was when I started going through social work and the things that I wanted to do for people, and understanding that majority of the people that I know, and the people especially, this was reaffirmed as I was knocking doors in my district, people who are struggling and relying on social services are not just a bunch of lazy people who don't want to do anything. My mom was not lazy. She walked to work double shifts as a waitress to feed her two kids. And she needed food stamps to get by. She didn't always need them. We eventually got off of them and became self-sustaining. But she needed help. And it wasn't because she was a bad person. She wasn't, didn't fit all the stereotypes. She wasn't a drug user. She didn't do all this terrible stuff. We had a dad who left us. And so we needed help. And when I look at the political structures and the things that I really like to fight for, access to health care, access to a quality education that doesn't completely ruin your credit and you can never get ahead after you graduate, the things that are important to me and my people, I tend to align more with the Democratic Party. Now, that doesn't mean that I'm always 100% on board with everything that my party stands for. I think anyone who is lying to you. That's just not true. I fight more with Democrats than I do with Republicans, and I 100% mean that.